Good evening. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Space Mountain. Broadcasting a little late tonight. Had a lot of errands to run today, and it was just a horrible day. I mean, actually, everything went very smoothly. There was a lot of people in town. It took me way too long to try and pull out across traffic to get into another lane to go a different direction, and I pretty much lost my head and freaked out and screamed and, that kind of thing. But the windows were rolled up, so, I didn't scare anybody. And, but other than that, everything went totally well. I just woke up in a foul mood and circling in my head terrible shit. And I didn't explode or yell at my poor cat or anything. Idelon had a good day. She's asleep over there on the chair. But anyway, I got my laundry done and everything happened okay. Overly caffeinated a touch. But aside from that, I'm feeling much better now. I don't know why. I was so triggered this morning. But to my credit, I didn't really lash out or freak out, except for the pulling out into traffic and screaming in my car thing. But shit happens. And it's not like I attacked a grocery clerk or something when I went into the store. It was just kind of imploded all day long. But anyway, on the good side of today, I was able to get a local dispensary, a very nice weed shop, to hang a couple of my artworks. It was very nice of them to do so, so I thought I'd plug them on my process video here, if it'll focus on that. It is Dispensary 7884 in Taos, New Mexico, at 212 Bendix Drive, Unit E. It's, if you're familiar with Taos at all, it's over by the DMV, just one street back from it. And they're going to have Mercurial Mind and a drawing called Wishes hanging up. I've got them priced, and also have the location of Garage Art, my little gallery that's going to be opening for the first time this season, probably this Monday. I have to go in and to town to send off some mail, so I think I'm going to set up Monday afternoon, probably by noon, 12:30, for at least a few hours, open it up, clean it up, air it out, and get it a little bit broken in to start officially doing some days in March. So I have that I'm looking forward to. And okay, that's about it for catching up on weirdness and what's going on in Taos with Adam Sturch Art and my Garage Art Gallery. And tonight on this, I'm just going to do a little detail work on the treehouse, the clothing of the couple, maybe the battleship, and then reinforce the depths, the deepest part of the blue with a deeper ultramarine blue. And then we're going to put some leaves on the tree. I've decided to do that. I think that would be nice. And it's already overlapping the roller coaster anyway, so I might as well just run with it and give it some nice depth between the two. So here we go. Rambled for 4 minutes. Jesus Christ. That's what happens when I have too much coffee. Sorry, folks. Alright, let's get to work. That you get in a DMT flash, although I suspect that what that is that we've been polluted by Disney. That Disney has given us this vision of fairies and were too harmless. And, it's the Tinkerbell phenomenon. Because if you go back before, is it Andrew Lang who wrote all those books, the blue fairy book, the brown fairy book, the white fairy book? Those are weird, those stories. I mean, fairies are weird. They steal babies. That's their main way of relating to human beings, is they steal human infants and leave behind wizened, deformed, sickly
mostly creatures who become very strange and peripheral kinds of human beings. And fairies, if you get trapped in fairyland, the only way out is through, and they're language oriented. They will never do you damage if you can convince them that you're a master of words. You know, it's poetry that they like. And all over the world, there is this persistent motif of these small entities. Well, I'm not suggesting that they're really there, but I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's odd that they should persist and that they should be experientially available. I mean, you have to understand, I mean, a different person saying this to you, it would be a whole different thing. You know, if it was Madame so-and-so Egyptian, so forth and so on. I'm pushed to this stuff by experience, because my inclination is toward reason, you know. It's just that everybody moves along safe channels. Everybody stays out of the fast lane. And if you move to the edges, and drugs are certainly an edge, and you know, a full exploration of one's sexuality is certainly an edge, and going off to weird corners of the world and staying long periods of time is certainly another edge. And if you do these kinds of whole affirming world of white bread, European bourgeois, work hard types, just looks as weird as any cultural adaptation could possibly be. I mean, I have said many times, and you probably agree to some degree, that reality is created by language. But we don't realize how true this is, that reality really is created by language, and that we are all imprisoned in somebody else's language. This isn't how we want to talk. Most of the words, I'd say 90% of the words and constructions we use would be great-grandfather. You know, we are living inside a 90% 19th century worldview, and culture cannot evolve any faster than its language evolves, because what cannot be said cannot be done. What cannot be said cannot be put in place. So in a way, one way of thinking about psychedelics is that they empower language. It's a way to force the evolution of language. The way you stretch the envelope of culture is by creating language. Everybody, I mean, this happens unconsciously in society, you know, Hasidic Jews or reggae people or whatever, the way they create their boundaries is through language, you know? I mean, the Catholic Church, this is how they do it. I mean, speaking Yiddish is a way to do it. You create a new reality inside the old one, and you can do it by moving backward into a specialized language, or you can move forward into a new language. I mean, look at how the introduction of the computer has transformed our language in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, draw CPU, throughput, output, input, bug, glitch, all of this stuff. These are words that have been empowered by our involvement with a machine. Now, before that, the major influence on language in my lifetime was the LSD episode of the 1960s. And it always amuses me how much time and energy the establishment spends on heaping abuse on hippie talk. And it's even now, it's sold to you guys as West Coast talk. It's sold on the West Coast as LA talk. It's sold, here you are, you're close to it, but not of it. It's like they used to say of the Watergate scandal, linked but not tainted. And what LSD did, I mean, I can remember concept like ego trip. The first time I heard that, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't have the concept. Well, then once somebody explains to you the concept, then you've got it. Vibes. That notion introduced a whole bunch of people to the idea of emotions. You said, you walk in a room, it was a bad vibe, man. Means that there's no rational deconstruction of what was going on, but you could just tell it was not a place you wanted to be. So it began to empower new realities that were able to emerge. And it was very important, I think, to the establishment to suppress that, because new words are the beginnings of new realities. That, the gay thing is an interesting example of that. I mean, it goes from, what was it called in the 19th century? The love that dare not speak its name. Interesting. See, it was there, but you dare not speak its name. Somehow to name it was to bring it too much into the forefront. And people who were gay, nobody could anybody. It was worse than being a communist. Now, it's empowered. And all the various racial groups who have had to come up through the American meat grinder have had to create vocabularies of community that they were proud of, rather than accepting the vocabulary of the dominator culture. I mean, a good example is the NAACP. The words colored people is embedded there, and yet these were the sincerest and most radical people in that movement. At a certain, they did the dominator designation for their subgroup and constantly oppressed minorities. They're trying to get the language right. And it's important for us to do this too. I mean, are we stoners? Are we heads? Are we shaman? What are we exactly? Well, pouring psychedelic substances into that mix then opens the doorway for the logos to define you. And building community is part of this. We are an interesting potential community because we tend, unfortunately, toward the lily white, but not concerned. I don't see any class dominating. There are probably people in this room who could buy and sell all the rest of us without going past their small change. There are also probably people who scraped and saved for this weekend and could ill afford it. We don't seem to be embedded in that class structure so much. Maybe we represent a level of education. Maybe we're some kind of generally definable group of people by level of education, but I don't see that either. What holds us together is what holds all subcultures together, which is an experience. In this case, not something else, but the experience of being loaded. And, it's a very powerful and immediate kind of experience. And I'm sure some of us are more loaded than others. And in any subgroup, you'll get that kind of a spectrum. Yeah.
Well, this is just I don't want to talk about the DMT. What do you go to it now for? I mean, have you gotten familiar with the terrain, or is it every time it's shocking as the first time?
It's always pretty shocking. I've spent a lot of time on it. What happens for me is that these entities want me to do what they're doing. And what they're doing is using sound to make objects appear out of the air. They can sing objects into existence. And this, I think that they're language elves. They're not made of matter. Well, then what are they made of? It seems as though the place you go on DMT is made purely of language. It's as though there is a syntax hard thing to picture, but they are more like sometimes they're like sentences rather than organisms. The essence of their presentation is like that of a pun. And so what they want you to do is they want you to learn to make a better kind of language. They want you not more articulate, not more clearly defined, but they actually believe or suggest that there can be a dimensional breakthrough into a language that is seen with the eyes. I think that the breakthrough that we're waiting for is not going to come out of a political movement or a redistribution of wealth or anything which could be called political. It's going to come out of a shift in the body. And these things happen. I mean, it's very mysterious how it happens. Like, think about language, ordinary language. Here you have two people. One is mute, and the other has the ordinary powers of speech. They look exactly alike. You can't tell a mute person from anybody else. And narrowly complex behavior. Language is a behavior of some sort. And it's very hard to imagine that it slowly insinuated itself into our being. It looks to me more like it was a kind of quantum leap of some sort, and probably appeared very suddenly. And there have been other less dramatic but more recent things like this going on. For example, you know, you go to school and they teach you that in the 15th century, perspective was the thing for me to understand. I mean, perspective was discovered. How could it be discovered? I mean, you just walk, here it is, right? And say, no, before 1425, people didn't know that the part of the house farther from you was smaller than the part of the house. You can't understand. It doesn't make any kind of sense. Another example is St. Augustine, who was this great father of the church and who was, by the way, African. And he was known as the most brilliant theologian of his age. And the way he would prove to people that he was an exceptional and holy man was they would open a book of theology in front of him and let him look at it for a few minutes, and then they would close the book, and he would be able to tell them what was written there. As far as we can tell, St. Augustine was the only man in Europe who could read silently. Can you imagine this? It was a miracle. It's like, we don't know how the bugger does it. You just show him the book, and then he can tell you what's written there. Meanwhile, everybody else has to say, now we've completely assimilated this, although there are still a few among us who move their lips when they read. Vladimir Nabokov used to cruelly sneer at these people. He said once in an interview, he said, I didn't write books for people who move their lips when they read. And a final example, which will indicate that we've come to the end of the line, in terms of sudden behaviors emerging, is, according to my friend Bill Gibson in his book, The Difference Engine, oral sex was virtually unknown in England until the middle of the 19th century. And then it was brought in by French prostitutes, and it was just a mind-boggling concept to these Victorians. They could not wrap their mind around it. Well, you know, from our vantage point, we probably probably assume people have been into this since the Stone Age. Maybe they have, but at least for several centuries in Victorian England, it absolutely died out as inconceivable. And, you know, breakdancing is another one of these where a behavior suddenly emerges completely coherent and formed, and then it recedes. So or if it has cultural utility, it's stabilized, such as my previous example. So what these types seem to be trying to say is there is a way for you to use your voice in order to activate a language which is not culturally taught. It isn't that you learn it from your parents, but that it's in the bone. A poetic language, a language scripted into your genes, and not only is it an Ursprach, an original speech, the vehicle of primal poetry, it can be seen. And, you know, it's interesting how, in our culture, when we talk about how somebody is really a gifted speaker, we always reach for visual metaphors. We say, I see what you mean, you know. And in Spanish, they say, if they're talking to you and they want to know if you've followed, they say, is it clear? Claro? Claro, it means, is it clear? It's a visual metaphor. Say, she paints a picture, or his words have great clarity. What this means is that unconsciously, we trust the eyes, and we don't trust the ears. And telepathy, which most people, I think of as being able to hear somebody else think, is not that at all. What telepathy is when you see what other people mean. Because when you see what somebody means, it's like standing in their shoes. Point of view. That's a very visual oriented. If you can understand somebody else's point of view, you are that person in that moment for that purpose. And I think that it's amazing that the world has evolved as far and as fast as it has, the human world, glued together by nothing more than small mouth noises. I mean, that's what we're talking here, small mouth noises. As monkeys, we're set up for this. I mean, you can talk longer than just about any other activity that you can do without becoming exhausted. I mean, I'm the living proof of it. A very small amount of energy is required to keep the old tongue and lips going with the air moving out. I mean, imagine if we had to communicate as deaf people do with sign language all the time. This is exhausting. I mean, nobody communicates like that for 4 or 5 hours at a stretch. And yet Castro can give a 4-hour speech at the drop of a hat. So we're set up for this. The problem is it requires a congruence of interior dictionaries, because what happens is my words go across space as an acoustical signal. They enter your ear. You are very rapidly looking up each word as it comes in and comparing it to your definition. And as
That's moving along pretty nicely, but I think I want to do a little more work to the tree and make the limbs a bit more pronounced, and then maybe to the boat as well. So I'm going to pick up with the second take coming up.
Just said to you,
Take 2.
because then it turns out, you know, the definitions are wildly variant. I mean, it's not so wild if you're saying, you know, since you're up, would you get me a grant? Although even that's ambiguous. Maybe they say, why don't you just have 1 grant? You know? But if you get into deep stuff, if you're saying, the ontological modalities of the post-Renaissance mind have issued into a situation of deconstructionist vitality such that all bets are off. Say, now, would you explain to me what I just said? I can't even do it with myself. I mean, people say, would you repeat what you just said? No chance, And I've looked at this, and there are models for this kind of verbal communication. Did we talk yesterday about the octopi and all that? No, thank God. Well, see, whenever you think you're about to take a step that nobody has taken and go a place nobody's ever been, if you look back at Mother Nature, you can usually find that you've been scooped. And a very interesting example of this vis-a-vis language is what's going on with octopi. Octopi and squids, as you may or may not know, but most people know it because they absorb all these TV shows about nature. Somebody once said to me, I know you don't like television, but it's a wonderful way for my children to learn about nature. Anyway, what we've all learned from watching these wonderful shows about nature is that octopi can change colors. And most people think it's because they're into camouflage. You move on to green seaweed, you turn green, brown rocks, you turn brown. It isn't that at all. It's something much more profound. It's that all over the surface of octopi are these specialized cells called chromatophores, and they can change into many colors. And not only can the octopus change colors, but the ordinary rubbery, smooth surface of the octopus can be made like goosebumps, but more dramatically, wrinkled very suddenly. The other thing about an octopus is, because they're soft-bodied, when they're in water, which is their natural element, they are very, very adept at folding and unfolding various parts of their body, so they can reveal a part of their body and then fold in and then show another part, and they're like a silk scarf in water. Well, what's going on here is that octopi communicate with each other by the way they look. And at first, this doesn't seem so profound, it just seems interesting. But when you analyze what's happening, you realize that this is a profound evolution in the project of communication, because there is no culturally sanctioned dictionary among octopi. And really what is happening is the octopus wears its mind on its surface. They have a vast repertoire of dots, blushes, traveling patterns that move across their surface. And these behavioral displays indicate the internal state of the organism. It is literally, it wears its language on the surface of its skin. It is a syntactical creature. Its behavior is its syntax. And some of these the octopi as a whole, they're mollusks. They're not even vertebrates. I mean, these things split from the line of development that leads to us 700 million years ago. And you want to talk about an alien form of life. An octopus is about as far away from the human experience as you can possibly get. They evolved in shallow coastal waters, but then because so many things were evolving in those shallow waters, some of them evolved into the benthic depths. And in those depths, there is no light. So in order to preserve their ability to communicate over long periods of time, they evolved phosphorescent chromatophores all over their body. And some octopi even have eyelid-like membranes put on various places of their skin so that they can blink very rapidly and modulate the phosphorescent light. So you can imagine in the darkness of the benthic depths of the ocean, the communication between two octopi is just a dance of lights in utter darkness. I mean, these are its naked mind in the water. And when they are in communication like that, they are, for all practical purposes, one organism. This is why octopi excrete ink into the water. It's so that they can have a private moment. You know, essentially the octopus ink is the equivalent of correction fluid. You know, you just have to erase. You say, I didn't mean that at all. And then, you know, here's what I really meant. Well, this is why I'm interested in virtual reality, because it seems to me what we're trying to do is some kind of striptease of the mind. We want to get the mind naked, because if it can be made naked, then we will understand each other. We are clothed in flesh, and then clothing, and then class difference, race difference, age difference, income difference. But if you could see the mind naked, the commonality of human beings would be reinforced, and the presence of ego among us would be diminished. Also, there's no ambiguity in visible language. And it's interesting that in the book of Revelations, there is this talk about how there is this sword which comes out of the mouth. It's describing a word which can be seen. And the whole history of the evolution of the Western mind is, in a sense, the birth of the Logos. The Logos is making its way towards self-expression. And it's doing this by claiming dimension after dimension of manifestation. And I think that electronic media and electronic culture and drugs and the mixing of all our world cultures together, what this is empowering is a visible logos, a logos that is beheld and therefore lacks ambiguity. Yeah. Well, mind and soul, in my estimation, probably not correctly, tend to migrate toward each other. You know, in the late medieval period, you get a lot of talk about, is the spirit the same thing as the soul, and are these things the same as the intellect? I mean, yes, we are soul, but I would say mind is the visible manifestation of soul. That would be a good Catholic definition, because you see that keeps soul out of animals. If you say mind is the visible manifestation of soul, then you have restricted the existence of soul to the human species.
Western scientific ideology, I think, looking at Kant, the same cosmic language that intuition are a higher form of intelligence than the mind.
Well, the mind is not a form of intelligence. The mind is the theater in which intelligence is manifested. You don't want to confuse the garage with the car.
And you're really the power. We give it heart and mind. It never is the mind, or never is the heart. You're using all the equipment.
Well, maybe I sort of hear you associating mind to brain, because you're saying heart and mind. I mean, mind is heart. Everything goes on within the confines of mind. It's like the light that you switch on when you walk into a darkened room, and then everything else is the furniture within the room. Mind is simply the light which is shed over the landscape of appearances. I mean, this is only my definition. I'm aware of the Neoplatonic emphasis on the mind. I think they called it the ends, and so forth and so on. But in modern psychological terms, the mind is just the theater of cognition in some way. Mind, consciousness. No, consciousness is something which happens in the mind. I mean, there is an unconscious mind as well. Mind is the inclusive category, I think. Yeah. Right.
So that they change to whatever the current technology
Yeah, I think that's very good. That, the hardest thing to figure out is a mirror. Because what a mirror shows you is yourself. But a mirror is not yourself. A mirror is a piece of glass with silver vapor deposited on the back of it. But that's a very different thing from yourself. And in this psychic domain, in this psychedelic space, you are not simply perceiving that space, you are creating it with your expectations as well. So if you have strong expectations of a certain sort, that will be the character of the thing. I think we talked about this yesterday, about how here we have peasant A chopping wood in the woods, and suddenly a ripple of heat passes through the forest, and a hackle-raising sense of weirdness. And this guy throws down his axe and looks over his shoulder, and a light is descending from the sky. Now, what happens next, interestingly enough, depends on the year and the place. If the year is, let's say, 1000, and the place is southern France, then the Virgin Mary will be descending from the sky. If the place is Kansas, and the date is 1958, then the space people are descending from the sky. You see, what happens is that when there is cognitive dissonance, good old psychological phrase, when there is cognitive dissonance, the mind rushes forward to provide explanation. I mean, it's amazing. You just walk with people and walk outside, and there's a little light in the sky. It's no big deal, just a moving light. And everybody will say, I wonder if it's a UFO. It means, they've got something hiding in the back of their mind. And if anything gets slightly weird, they will rush this explanation forward. And for some people, it's Jesus, and for somebody else, it's Maitreya or somebody. So cultural expectations are inextricably woven in to these strange encounter scenarios. There was an interesting UFO theory a few years ago that I thought was kind of cute. I didn't exactly believe it, but these people, Michael Persinger and some Lafreniere, they wrote a really amusing book called Space-Time Transience and Unusual Events. And one of the things they came up with was along earthquake faults, you get the grinding of enormous masses of rock together. And if these rock masses have a high percentage of quartz in them, you can get what is called piezoelectric phenomena. Now, piezoelectricity is simply a peculiar form of static electricity, but what it would do is it would create ball lightning in the sky, which would follow these stress lines in the earth. And, there is a connection not understood between earthquakes and the appearance of UFOs. But one of the interesting things that Persinger discovered about piezoelectricity is that if you in the laboratory build piezoelectric generators that generate fields of enormous strength, then as a person is exposed to these things, they actually mess with your mind. They actually people become more and more confused and uneasy and ultimately panic-stricken in the presence of these piezoelectric fields. Well, once you pass the panic moment, then your mind is going to start telling you what's happening. It's going to say, you're having an encounter, something weird is going on, and then out of the unconscious comes the projection, the flying saucer, the Virgin Mary, the elf invasion, the manifestation of Maitreya, whatever it is. So it's that mind goes to meet the unknown, but not without a hell of a lot of baggage of its own, which it immediately tries to unpack and put into the drawers of the other as soon as it arrives. Yeah?
I'm going to test you a theory.
Oh, dear.
Mind is not intelligent. I couldn't get the next one. That would...
Too fast and too brilliant for me, too. The mind is not intelligence. It's not the soul. It's sort of the theater in which all these other things take their place. Somebody behind. Yeah.
Yes, who was the guy you mentioned that you've seen in the Amazon shooting beams of red lights, creating magical battles? Could you describe a magical shamanic battle, how it would occur? And would that be a psychedelic battle where there would be energy throwing shot back and forth?
Well, all I have is the anecdote, which I'll tell you. When Kath and I were in the Amazon in '76 taking ayahuasca, we got in with this certain group of people in Peru that took it every week. And, cultures have different ways of handling hassle. And in some cultures it's confrontational, in other cultures not. The way these Peruvian country folk operated was if somebody was screwing up, nobody would ever say so. They would just talk about these people behind their back until the morphogenetic field of gossip was so strong that you would basically awaken to the problem. So there was a complex social situation going on in this ayahuasca circle, which was there was a master shaman who we were apprenticed to, who was beloved by his neighborhood. But he had a nephew, a sobrino, who was a jerk. I mean, this guy was, as Don Fidel said, ambitious. He dealt a little weed, he did a little pimping, he was just sort of an edge runner type of guy. And every Saturday night we would all get together and take ayahuasca, about 30 of us. Older shamans, our guy, people from the neighborhood, and this sobrino, Don Jose. So, I don't know what the real history of it was, because I had just arrived on the scene. But these old guys would sing these icaros, these magical songs on ayahuasca that appear as colored tapestries in front of your eyes. And they had soul, they were into it, and this guy would sing against them. I mean, it's the rudest thing you can possibly imagine. I mean, imagine if Lou Reed were trying to give a performance and the guy in the third row just launched into Old Man River and kept at it, I mean, in this town, I'm sure large guys would appear and say, "Sir." In Peru, it didn't work like that. They just kept singing. he kept singing, and it was clear that this is how it was going to be handled, that we had just divided into two separate entities here. Well, my wife was sitting next to me, and he was sitting across the room from us, the Sobrino, and I had been watching him for a long time, and I was loaded to the gills, and I could see he would get up on his haunches, and he looked like a monkey. His face, it was uncanny. I mean, he looked like a monkey, and he also looked kind of like a jackal, a dog with long teeth. He kept going through these changes, and Kat leaned over to me and said something like, "This guy's an asshole." And I just said, let it slide. What do we know? Think of it as anthropology. She wasn't having it. So after a while, he kept doing this, and at one point, and everybody in the room, every person in the room was bummed out, and they were looking at their laps. All eye contact was broken. It's actually, when I was a kid, I invented a word. The word is fardau, and it means the embarrassment you feel when someone else fucks up. And you happen to just be there, but somehow the aura of it is so strong. So the entire room is just awash in fardau, and the old guys are singing, and the guy is singing. So then at the end of a particularly intense clash of these two styles, my wife just looked across the room at this guy and put the whammy on him. And I saw these red arrows leave her eyes and like dotted lines go across the and they move fairly slowly, more slowly than you could throw a ball or something. Well, when this line of red arrows got to this guy, he was knocked off his feet. He fell backwards with his legs in the air, and there was a big noise. And all the singing stopped, and everybody in the room looked up. And these three old shaman who were sitting behind Don Fidel, who I, to that point, had not heard speak any language but Quechua, one turned to the other and he says in Spanish, "Oh, the gringa sings the zabula." Yeah. You mean becoming a jaguar and all that?
Yeah. What's happening here, or are they the night bird? The night bird, the animals,
It's everything happens. I mean, they used to, when I first went to the Amazon, they used to say to us, the Indians and the folks who helped us haul our stuff around, they would say, "La selva como un sueño." It's like a dream. The forest is like a dream. And I thought that was a poetic metaphor of some sort, it's not. It's that you need to read various people who've written on the boundary
Alright, so that gets a little more detail happening throughout the lower scene. Still a little ways to go, but this one's getting closer. I would like to do more with the clouds. Oh, put the strap off the knob there.
And they really do happen. I've seen this in myself.
That gives a little more character to the sea monster.
I knew virtually no botany. I only knew drug botany because I was
Gets the black reinforced within the figure. It's a little scrubbier, a little more textural, which is nice.
Where no words related to where I
Figures,
was would come to me.
some brightly colored clothing.
That's what it was to me. It was
A little
the big
scrub
green,
gray on
and
the
there was a
boat.
lot of different kinds of green, and that was it.
And gets the
Well, then the
treehouse
next time I
a
went
bit
to
more
the Amazon,
personality.
I was with professional
And the tree
field
as well.
botanists, and we would go out into the
Alright,
jungle, and
so
these guys were
that
just
ends
like
a
children,
weird day,
"Look at this.
much
This
better.
is a Palacarea.
Eidolon
Look at these marula
passed out,
trees. Look
happy,
at this
stuffed full of
hyacinthus.
pate,
Look at this, look at this."
and
soon my mind
watching
was
this Terrence.
filled
We're going to
with
pass out
language
soon.
about
Get
the
this posted up
green, and the green
and
all
go to bed.
disappeared.
So thank you for watching. It's Adam
Instead,
Search
there were
broadcasting from the
plants
Mushroom Mansion,
that I
Taos, New
knew
Mexico.
that were familiar
working the oil painting
And
space
this coming to
mountain.
terms with a local language is very interesting. You see, you speak the language you speak
Have a
in
good night,
most
Earth.
cases because of where you were born.